Mr. President, let me say right from the outset that the UK Independence Party, my party, the members of which who are so often dismissed as Little Englanders, totally deplore the outbreaks of petty nationalism in the UK and France over this beef issue. However, I find it ironic that the EU institutions, which introduced the ban on British beef exports in 1996, and which exist to promote the unity and cooperation of European nations, have, by their original actions, created a political situation which has directly led to this disharmony. My party, which has a clear election manifesto to seek Britain's withdrawal from the EU, notes that if the Commission had not interfered in the first place back in 1996, individual nations would have been able to decide whether or not to buy British beef. At that time, a number of countries, particularly South Africa and Botswana, were willing to continue to buy British produce. Without the EU ban, Britain would have been free to exploit alternative markets, and this crisis would not have arisen. Now we have a classic demonstration that membership of the EU is bad for British business. It affirms my belief that it's about time that my own country recognise that our interests are best served by not being a member of this club. Most people in the UK thought we joined a free trade area, but this crisis demonstrates it is anything but that. While the UK has obeyed EU law to the letter, other countries are running a cart and horse through the rule book. The level playing field is about as level as the decks of the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. Thus, while I wish the Commissioner well in his endeavours, I am afraid that whatever he does, it will not be good enough. I, for one, will be urging my own government to leave this club and to rejoin the real trading world.
Now on behalf of the EFD, Mr. Farage.
Well, good morning, Mr. Schulz. President Schulz, I know it's my job to congratulate you, but given that we knew this result 2.5 years ago, as a result of a stitch-up, there really doesn't seem to be much point. I mean, after all, nobody in Europe would ever, modern-day Europe, would ever have a big, powerful job that was decided by a full, open process. I'm sure Mr. Barroso would agree. I was musing this morning. I was thinking, what kind of President Schulz are we going to get? Are we going to get a dignified, calm, a figure that behaves like the Speaker of all great parliaments around the world, somebody who puts himself above politics and the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day arguments and is an ambassador, indeed a statesman? Or are we going to get the Martin Schulz we've got to know since 2004 as leader of the socialist group? You know the one I mean. Snarling, angry, unable to control his temper, intolerant of anybody with an alternative point of view, somebody who is contemptuous when in free referendums people have the temerity to vote no, somebody who is anti-British to his fingertips and doesn't like free markets. I was wondering which one would we get? Well, your opening speech has settled that question for me, and it's pretty clear. We're going to have 2.5 years of political fanaticism from the chair. And I have to say, only a third world country, only a banana republic would want to have an overtly political president of a parliament. But it's what we've got. I may represent the smallest group in this parliament, Mr. Schulz, but I can tell you that it's a group whose ideas and whose views are now being echoed by a growing number of citizens right across this continent. I'm sure you'd agree. The opinion polls show it's kind of 50-50 whether people think this EU is a good thing or a bad thing. What we represent, sir, is not anti-Europeanism. That is not what it's about. We believe in nation-state democracy. We want a Europe of trade. We want a Europe of cooperation. We want a Europe that is responsible. We don't want a Europe that seeks to be a global superpower. We don't want a Europe run by Mr. Barroso and the Commission and the so-called community method. And I will do my very best to provide political opposition to your presidency over the course of the next 2.5 years, and I hope you give us a fair hearing. Thank you. I think they're just slightly over-enthusiastic. Well, it wasn't supposed to be like this, was it? Because Mr. Cameron's renegotiation began with really big intentions. Treaty change. He was going to question blue cards going up already. This is going to be fun.
He was going to control the free movement of people. He was going to achieve a fundamental change, not just in Britain's relationship with the European Union, but reform the EU itself. And what we got was a letter from Mr. Tusk, in which there's no treaty change, no powers returned to the United Kingdom, and no control over our borders at all. In fact, it was hardly worth the wait. It's really rather pathetic. But there is, of course, one more chance for the Prime Minister, because he goes to the European Summit in a couple of weeks' time, and like Oliver Twist, he will parade in front of the other leaders and say, please, can we have some more concessions? I find it rather humiliating that a British Prime Minister has to do this, but I'm certain of one thing: he won't get another thing. Because just look at the substance of this. We have an emergency brake on migrant benefits. Wow. It was supposed to be a total ban on migrant benefits for up to 4 years. So it is hardly an emergency brake, it's more of a handbrake turn.
A tea break.
And the Prime Minister is saying we've got a red card. Isn't that wonderful? Well, what that means is, if a majority of parliaments in the European Union can say to Mr. Juncker they don't want one of his directives, is that a cause for celebration? I mean, if 15 parliaments couldn't stop a piece of law, we'd be living in a communist dictatorship. And what I've gone through here are the good bits. But the most bizarre thing is Mr. Cameron said with this deal, he would now vote for Britain to join the European Union. So let's have a little think about that. If the question in June was, should we join the European Union, we'd have to tell the British people, you must surrender the control and sovereignty of your parliament and have 75% of your laws made somewhere else. Your Supreme Court will not be supreme. You will be overruled by a court in Luxembourg made up of people who aren't even judges. You will have to give up your fishing grounds, including, in some places, 200 miles of the North Sea, and you must cut your links with the Commonwealth and the wider world because you're no longer fit to negotiate your own global trade deals. Oh, and by the way, for all of this, you'll be paying £55 million a day as a membership fee. Would the British people vote for that? Not a snowball's chance in Hades. And all we have to do is recognise that whilst the politicians and the big banks and the big businesses will in this referendum defend their own vested self-interests, it's people power that will win this referendum. And after we've won this referendum, I hope in many other countries in Europe too.
Yeah.
We were told that when we had a president, we'd see a giant global political figure. The man that would be the political leader for 500 million people. The man that would represent all of us on the world stage. The man whose job was so important that, of course, you're paid more than President Obama. Well, I'm afraid what we got was you. And I'm sorry, but after that performance earlier that you gave, and I don't want to be rude, but you know, really, you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you? I'd never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you. I would like to ask you, President, who voted for you? And what mechanism? Oh, I know democracy's not popular with you lot. And what mechanism do the peoples of Europe have to remove you? Is this European democracy? Well, I sense, though, that you're competent and capable and dangerous. And I have no doubt that it's your intention to be the quiet assassin of European democracy and of the European nation states. You appear to have a loathing for the very concept of the existence of nation states. Perhaps that's because you come from Belgium, which of course is pretty much a non-country. But since you took over, we've seen Greece reduced to nothing more than a protectorate. Sir, you have no legitimacy in this job at all, and I can say with confidence that I can speak on behalf of the majority of the British people in saying, we don't know you, we don't want you, and the sooner you're put out to grass, the better.
Well, as you said, Mr. President, you wouldn't like to be rude, and I prefer to go ahead with this statement.
I'm very disappointed with you, President Buzek. It is not acceptable that in this Parliament, a group chairman not only criticises the President of the Council, but calls him a wet rag. And I expect you, President, to call this person to order. It's not right that this man should be able to trample over the dignity of this House. And Joseph Dole, it's not just a case of getting or allowing the UK to leave the EU. It'd be better for Mr. Farage to resign if the European Union and the European Parliament are such bad things in his eyes.
Thank you, President. Just as I have said to President Farage previously, 2 months ago, and today I repeat this, these type of addresses, which are character assassinations of individuals, are inadmissible in the European Parliament, and I spoke to Mr. Farage about it, and I drew his attention to it. Mr. Schulz, I'd like to say that this is how I work, and that's my way of going about it.
Is it personal statement?
At the end of the debate.
Bardzo proszę.
The floor is yours.
You may not like what I say, but just consider your behaviour. You, after the Irish people in a referendum voted no, said that our group had opened, by supporting the no vote, that we'd opened the door to fascism. You said that we had behaved as a group in the Parliament like Hitler and the Nazis in the Reichstag. We've been called by Danny Cohn-Bendit mentally weak. You know, it has to be, it can't be one way.
It is not personal statement. Mr. President Farage, it is not personal statement. I am very sorry, it was not personal statement. We must keep order and all the regulations of our Parliament.
And now the weather for all areas of the British Isles, but definitely not Bongo Bongo land. You may have heard about a storm in a teacup that developed when a UKIP town councillor in Oxfordshire was suspended by my party after he blamed the floods on David Cameron's gay marriage bill. The old parties are seeking to cloud the big political issues of the day by focusing on the view of UKIP members like him, even though he'd said a deluge of similar things before when he was a Tory councillor. How quickly some things change depending on which way the wind blows. Now, if you look around the UK, you'll see there are outbreaks of sometimes balmy, occasionally extremist views from people of all political persuasions. In Whitby, the sun was apparently briefly obscured by a UFO after a Labour councillor claimed to have fathered a child with an extraterrestrial. He also says his real mother is a 9-foot green alien with 8 fingers. There were earth tremors in North Wales, where a Lib Dem councillor called John Larson was sentenced to 18 years in prison for setting off a series of explosions in the North Wales town of Denbigh. Talk about extremism. And the weather for those of you thinking about heading off for the slopes? Well, there were flurries of embarrassment for the Tories after MP Aidan Burley organised a Nazi-themed stag party at an alpine ski resort. Anyone thinking of heading off on holiday to Brussels this week, perhaps getting there on the gravy train, watch out for a warm front of relentless hot air. Back in Britain, and the long-range forecast, and we can see temperatures rising ahead of the European elections in May. It could get stormy, so I advise you to avoid light aircraft. We hope there'll be a sprinkling of real ale on lower-lying areas, outbreaks of common sense, and absolutely no chance of cyclonic fruitcakes. Back to you, Andrew, with the rest of the Sunday politics.
We should be proud of the fact that in these islands, we trust the people with these big decisions.
Well, at 20 minutes to 5, we can now say the decision taken in 1975 by this country to join the common market has been reversed by this referendum to leave the EU. We are absolutely clear now that there is no way that the Remain side can win. It looks as though the gap's going to be something like 52 to 48, so a 4-point lead for leaving the EU. And that's the result of this referendum, which has been preceded by weeks and months of argument and dispute and all the rest of it. The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're ours, speaking outside the House of Commons.
United Kingdom. And just look at it, even the weather's improved. It's been a hell of a long journey, this. I first got involved in Eurosceptic politics 25 years ago, and the first election I contested, I managed to beat the late, great, screaming Lord Such by 164 votes, so I didn't come last. And now there are 17 million people that voted for Brexit. It's a victory for ordinary people, decent people. It's a victory against the big merchant banks, against the big businesses, and against big politics. And I'm proud of everybody that had the courage, in the face of all the threats, everything they were told, they had the guts to stand up and do the right thing. The election was won, in my view, in the Midlands and the North, and I think it was the old Labour vote that came to us, and we, particularly as a party, campaigned as hard as we could in those areas. There is still a massive disconnect between Westminster, SW1 and real communities. And the one image I will remember throughout the rest of my life was a woman in Bolton grabbing my hands with tears in her eyes, saying, "Why doesn't David Cameron, why doesn't the government come and see what they've done to my community, what they've done to the prospects for my kids?" People here don't understand. They're too wealthy. They don't get what open door mass immigration as a result of EU membership has done to people's wages, to people's availability of getting GP appointments or their kids into local schools. This was the issue ultimately that won this election. So I'm thrilled that we've done this. I believe the other big effect of this election is not what's happened in Britain, but what will happen in the rest of Europe. I mean, in the rest of the EU, Eurosceptic parties never talked about leaving the EU, now they are. An opinion poll in the Netherlands said that a majority there now want to leave. So we may well be close, perhaps, to Nexit. And similarly in Denmark, a majority there are in favour of leaving, so we could be quite close to Dexit. And I'm told the same may apply to Sweden and perhaps Austria and perhaps even Italy too. The EU's failing, the EU's dying. I hope we've knocked the first brick out of the wall. I hope this is the first step towards a Europe of sovereign nation states, trading together, neighbours together, friends together, but without flags, anthems, or useless old unelected presidents. So what happens now? What happens next? Well, 17 million people have said we must leave the European Union. We now need a Brexit government. A government that gets on with the job. A government that begins the renegotiation of our trade relationship. A government that will be mindful that already many of the German car manufacturing unions have said, let's get on and do a deal. Let's go on selling motor cars and wine and cheese with each other. But a government also that at the same time uses the opportunity of Brexit. And the opportunity is we're now freed to start making our own trade deals and associations with the rest of the world. We've left behind, with this result, we've left behind a failing political union, but ourselves the chance to rejoin the world in a 21st century global economy. So we need, as I say, a Brexit government. We need the negotiations to start as soon as humanly possible. We need to start thinking globally about our future. And the other thing I think that needs to happen is that June the 23rd needs to become a national bank holiday, and we will call it Independence Day.
Aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind. Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today.
This will be a victory for real people.
We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore.
A victory for ordinary people.
We will be united in our common interest.
A victory for decent people.
Perhaps it's fate that today is
June the 23rd.
And you will once again be fighting for our freedom. Not from tyranny,
Multinationals,
oppression, or
the big merchant banks,
persecution,
big politics, lies, corruption and deceit.
but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to
Honesty,
exist.
decency and belief in nation.
And should we win the day,
June the 23rd,
no longer be known as
this failed project,
but as the day we
will have done it
will not vanish without a fight.
without a single bullet being fired.
We're going to live on.
We'd have done it by damned hard work.
We're going to survive.
We'd have done it not just for ourselves. We'd have done it for the whole of Europe.
Today, we celebrate our
Independence Day!
But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination. This is not a decision I've taken lightly, but I do believe it's in the national interest to have a period of stability and then the new leadership required. Thank you very much. Right.
When I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? And the reason you're so upset, the reason you're so angry, has been perfectly clear from all the angry exchanges this morning. You, as a political project, are in denial. You're in denial that your currency is failing. You're in denial. Well, just look at the Mediterranean. No. As a policy to impose poverty on Greece and the rest of the Mediterranean, you've done very well. And you're in denial over Mrs. Merkel's call last year for as many people as possible to cross the Mediterranean into the European Union has led to massive divisions between countries and within countries. But the biggest problem you've got, and the main reason the United Kingdom voted the way that it did, is you have, by stealth, by deception, without ever telling the truth to the British or the rest of the peoples of Europe, you have imposed upon them a political union. You've imposed upon them a political union. And when the people in 2005 in the Netherlands and France voted against that political union, when they rejected the Constitution, you simply ignored them and brought the Lisbon Treaty in through the back door. What happened? What happened last Thursday was a remarkable result. It was indeed a seismic result, not just for British politics, for European politics, but perhaps even for global politics too, because what the little people did, what the ordinary people did, what the people who have been oppressed over the last few years and seen their living standards go down, they rejected the multinationals, they rejected the merchant banks, they rejected big politics, and they said, actually, we want our country back. We want our fishing waters back. We want our borders back. We want to be an independent, self-governing, normal nation. And that is what we have done, and that is what must happen. And in doing so, we now offer a beacon of hope to Democrats across the rest of the European continent. I'll make one prediction this morning. The United Kingdom will not be the last member state to leave the European Union. So the question is, what do we do next? Now, it is up to the British government to invoke Article 50. And I have to say that I don't think we should spend too long in doing it. I totally agree, Mr. Juncker, that the British people have voted. We need to make sure that it happens. But what I would like to see is a grown-up and sensible attitude to how we negotiate a different relationship. Now I know that virtually none of you have ever done a proper job in your lives, or worked in business, or worked in trade, or indeed ever created a job. But listen, just listen.
Herr Farage, Augenblick.
Just a second.
Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen,
Ladies and gentlemen, I do understand that you're getting emotional, but you're acting like UKIP normally acts in this chamber, so please, don't imitate them. Mr. Farage, however, I would say one thing to you. The fact that you're claiming nobody has done a decent job in their life, you can't really say that. I'm sorry.
No, you're quite right, Mr. Schultz. UKIP used to protest against the establishment, and now the establishment protests against UKIP. So something has happened here. Let us listen to some simple, pragmatic economics. We, between us, between your countries and my country, we do an enormous amount of business in goods and services. That trade is mutually beneficial to both of us. That trade matters. If you were to decide to cut off your noses, to spite your faces, and to reject any idea of a sensible trade deal, the consequences would be far worse for you than it would be for us. And even no deal is better for the United Kingdom than the current rotten deal that we've got. But if we were to move to a position where tariffs were reintroduced on products like motor cars, then hundreds of thousands of German workers would risk losing their jobs. So why don't we just be pragmatic, sensible, grown up, realistic, and let's cut between us a sensible tariff-free deal, and thereafter recognize that the United Kingdom will be your friend, that we will trade with you, we will cooperate with you, we will be your best friends in the world. But do it sensibly, and allow us to go off and pursue our global ambitions and future. Thank you.
And this guy, come here, Nigel, come here. This guy, you know, they go around calling me Mr. Brexit. I said, there's only one real. How are you, Nigel? What a job he's done. Now, if I don't get there, he's still going to be number one. If I get there, I may supersede him.
I think you will.
So we'll see you in a couple of seconds. Thank you. What a great honor.